Welcome to my humble abode. I'm Yorkie the Talespinner, and this is Tales Over Coffee, a morning show where we start the day together with a narrative tale and a coffee, in the hope of welcoming a blessed day. And this is the continuing tale of Anton Rain's rather failed presidency of Sordland. Let's go. Right. We failed to get the constitutional amendments passed. We kind of got set up, I feel. And revealed ourselves to be rather weak. I don't think the rest of the presidency is going to go well. Let's go for the dinner at the family home. I arrived home from work, hung my jacket up, and put my briefcase in the hall. I paused, awaiting my usual greeting from my wife and daughter. Diana was out at one of her after-school art classes, I remembered. Where was Monica? From the living room, I heard a muffled sob. I entered to find Monica sitting on the sofa, a letter in her hands and a look of despair on her face. Darling, what's wrong? Monica briefly rested her head on my shoulder, then handed me the letter. From the Department of Education, Frank's university exam results are in. How did he do? I'm not going to assume anything. See for yourself. I looked at the page. Below Frank's name and address, his score was written 435 points out of a total of 1,000. That's not very good. 43.5%. At the bottom of the letter, the word failed was stamped in red. All those years of effort, all those private lessons, all down the drain. You know what this means? He's going to have to join the military. He could die, Anton. We could all die. Does he know the results yet? No, but he should be back from school soon. I just don't understand. Frank's a smart boy. Why would he sabotage himself like this? I heard a key turning in the front door. Frank stomped in and was about to go straight upstairs when he noticed us both in the living room. Mum, Dad, what's going on? Have a seat, Frank. He took a seat across from us, and I handed him the letter. He started reading it. I didn't think it was appropriate to just have the mother do all of the parenting. We're together in this. Oh shit. Son, we're not angry at you. I need a moment. He went to the kitchen sink and washed his face. A moment later he came back. I never thought this would happen. I'm so sorry. It's not the end of the world. Pretty close though, isn't it? Frank looked close to tears. Monica put a hand on his shoulder. Going to be okay, but you really should have studied harder, Frank. I know. I guess it's the army for me then. I'm going to take a pause here just to discuss something with you, briefly. I posted a short on the good ending and why I don't believe in it. That the good story can be a tragedy or a comedy, an uplift or a downshift. But the true good story is one where you follow your story as it goes. I initially designed Anton in concept to be a traditionalist, an oligarch, and very much into personal power. He would absolutely fix things for his son. That said, I then looked at some of the traditions that were going on, like sexist education and so on and so forth, teaching creationism. And it's so against how I myself feel. I didn't stick to what I was saying. I didn't stick to being even a benevolent tyrant. I folded and started going the way I myself might go. So I do consider this a failed run. And the question is, do I embrace who I've made him now more? Or do I fix it? And I think I Since it's a failed run anyway, I go back to fixing it. Yes. Monica surprised me with her enthusiasm. If Alfonso could get his dimwit son into Kings Hill College, University, I'm sure Halsord State would have room for a bright boy like Frank. I am a respected alumnus, it's true. Halsord State would be amazing. A bunch of my friends are going there. I could still come home to do my laundry. You could also study abroad. United People's University... Contana. No, actually, never mind. I don't like Contana. Never have. It's the future of our boy, Anton. What should we do? Halsord State University is the right decision after all. Thanks so much, Dad. I swear I won't let you down this time. Monica let out a long exhale. What a day. Who's hungry for dinner? Monica disappeared to the kitchen, Frank to his room. I went to my office and began making some phone calls. Supreme Court filed Urson versus Sordland dissent. The Supreme Court has filed 6-5 dissent and closed the Urson versus Sordland case today. Chief Justice Hawker dismissed the concurrence of the Ministry of Justice, citing that the treatment of Bloodish people has been equal before the law. Bullshit. Further, press releases were made criticising the words of the Vice Minister of Justice. Bloodish constitutional rights won't be in question for some time. That was another one that we tried to stand up for. Have a look at the news. Halsord Post. Court strikes down Urson versus Sordland. Chief Justice Hawker of the Supreme Court made an announcement after the majority of the justices voted against the violation of the constitutional rights for Bloodish citizens, as proposed by Urson. The landmark case, which was politically charged with the support of WPB and even PFJP establishment, caused a major disagreement between the Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court. Criticisms were handed over to Minister of Justice Nia Mogner, who filed a concurrence. Chief Justice Hawker highlighted the importance of impartial justice once again. Blackhaven Times. Ashraf University. Batani Ashraf. Hero to some, enemy to others. He is, for sure, one of the most controversial figures who have ever lived in our country. As his anniversary is approaching, there is one question that is shared by everyone's mind. What will the administration do? Every year people gather in Suzerain to hold a vigil in the solemn anniversary of his death. They light their candles in his memory and hold cultural festivals. What is different this year, however, are the claims that Bloodish movement will be holding their largest rally yet in Suzerain during the anniversary. Anniversary, not university, no. Perhaps it is time for the administration to let bygones be bygones. Take a step back to display the unity of Sordland to the people who need it, much need it. Enough with the Bloodish protests. Once again, the Bloodish protests in the country have claimed its toll. This time the toll was an injured child. On his way home from school, 13-year-old DK unknowingly entered the protest grounds. The police tried to suppress the protesters and the chaos ensued. Trapped between the police and the protesters, he was injured in the following stampede. His treatment still continues in Halsord General Hospital. Where will this end? People are demanding answers from the administration. We brought a lot of peace compared to how the riots were going on before. Justice failed once again from Radical. As expected, the Supreme Court ruled against Urson vs. Sordland case. The massive rights case has struck down any future precedent for an argument to be made against the constitutional rights violations of individuals through legislative action. Chief Justice Hawker argued that the Bloodish people are equal under the law. The Solist, constitutionalist justice, are going as far as they can to bend the truth to hide the inequalities of our society. The fight for justice will remain. Yeah, it's not good. Alright, briefing on diplomatic strategy. The doors of the White Room, like everything else in the Maroon Palace's main nerve centre, were painted white. Took a deep breath before pushing them open. Time for yet another meeting. At least this time it was with people who liked me. The attendees rose from their seats. Mr. President, said Lucian, Joseph nodded. He and Lucian sat down while David remained standing. Now that you are here, let's talk about our diplomatic strategy. David cleared his throat. Mr. President, if I may, I would like to provide you with a short overview of where we are right now. Go ahead. We decided not to pursue any deals with Welland and Agnolia, which means our presence in both regions is lacking. We must now look forward to the future. We were rather strong-armed by both of them, to be honest. What do you mean looking to the future? David sat down, pulled out a few papers and started going through them as he kept talking. Welland and Agnolia were practice runs. We must begin improving our relationship with greater nations. We need to elevate our international standing, especially the threat of Rumburg looming. Joseph cleared his throat. Mr. President, you know me. I don't trust the helping hands of other countries offer us, for a good reason. But I also know when those helping hands are necessary, and right now we need all the help we can get. I've said this over and over, but I will repeat it until you get it through your skull. Rumburg will come, sooner or later. And with the current state of our military, if a Rumburg invasion happens, Sordland will cease to exist. We need allies. We ought to heed General Lancier's advice, Mr. President, said Lucian. I trust your assessment, Joseph. Thank you, Mr. President. A military perspective is important, but these deals are about more than just gaining allies. We also need to consider the benefits to our economy such deals will provide, especially when we are still struggling to end the recession. David took a seat and brought out 2 stacks of documents. At the start of our term, I had a comprehensive trade plan laid out. Following the visits to Welland and Agnolia, we were to pursue potential trade deals with 2 greater nations. Sordland is one of them. We managed to get them to the table. There is much potential here. There is more potential here than in Welland or Agnolia. Because they are one of the most important countries in CSP, a deal with Sordland is a ticket to bring Sordland closer to the United Continental Sphere. Dealing with countries in CSP is dangerous. A simple trade deal wouldn't cause issues unless we decide to go further, said Lucian. Moving on to Lesbia. Our southern neighbour is one of the wealthiest countries in eastern Makopa. A trade deal with them would be very beneficial, not just for our economy, but also for our regional and international presence. Not to mention they are in the Arcasian sphere. That could open many doors for us. We already have Arcasian bases. True, a country as influential as Lesbia could help elevate our economy. And that is it for the overview. As to the actual contents of the trade deal, Lucian, said David. Lucian pulled out a small notebook and quickly flipped through the pages until he landed on the right one. Looking at my stats here, we now have a small tungsten surplus, which makes an excellent resource for trade. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. I need to know your decision before we can proceed. What should we do? Before you say anything, remember what I said Joseph. We need allies, not just a trade deal. If Rumburg attacks, we will fall. Lesbia. We already have Arcasian bases. There's good reason for them to stand stronger with us. Excellent news. I'll begin at once. That was all I had for today. Thank you for coming, said David. Thank you, gentlemen, said Lucian. Joseph saluted as we left the White Room. Report here. Recession hits workers. As in the rest of Sordland, workers in Gelsord are bearing the brunt of the recession. Though the highway is moving along slightly. The manufacturing sector has been hit particularly hard, as a record number of factory workers filed for unemployment over the past month. Check the news. Allsword Post. Isolated polio cases seen in Bergia. Several villages in Bergia have been safely placed under quarantine after a few polio cases were diagnosed in the region. The outbreak is largely confined to Welland. There is little chance of further infections occurring in Sordland. Even if there was, the disease's most notorious symptom, paralysis, is only seen in a minute percentage of cases, and there is no need to alter the Sordish way of life, as Health Minister Pascal Benevol has suggested with his vaccination programme, in order to prevent it. Oh great, we've got anti-vaxxers. Polio cases explode in Bergia, said the Lacovian Times. Concerning news from Bergia, several cases of polio have recently been diagnosed in the region. The outbreak thought to have originated across the border of Velen is currently confined to just a few villages, which are now under strict quarantine. However, Health Minister Pascal Venivol has called for swift action, including countrywide vaccination, to prevent the numbers from multiplying. We concur that this disease, which is known to cause paralysis in severe cases, is a serious threat and must be contained at all costs. And geopolitical, Rain will visit Lesbia for trade deal. President Rain has scheduled a visit to Lesbia in order to discuss a possible deal with Prime Minister Patricio Alvarez. Exactly what would be on the table is unclear, although insiders speculate Rain could be preparing to offer Swedish fish, wheat, coal or tungsten in exchange for Lesbian capital. An alliance between the two countries is also not out of the question. What is clear is this visit will bring Sordland closer to alignment with Acacia. I like that that's finally moving. A report from Holsord. Currency loses value against Arcasian lira. Financial reports show the Swedish Ren has steadily been slipping against the Arcasian lira, though the exchange rate has not yet approached the all-time low during the Alfonso administration. Cabinet meeting on the results of the vote. Not good. Lucian stood upright, holding a large folder of files under his arm. He bowed in acknowledgement. He looked exhausted. The cabinet has gathered in the White Room, sir. The Vice President will be opening the session soon. We can go in whenever you're ready. Anything you want to say before we go in? No, sir. Just keep your cool with the cabinet. I believe concerns will be raised during the meeting. Should I be expecting something? No, sir. I don't believe there's anything we didn't expect. However, our failure on the reforms had a huge impact on public opinion. The party is quite discontent about the whole situation. They believe your presidency has destroyed the USP's prestige. Oh. Alright, let's go to the meeting and hear the concerns. Of course, sir. Lucian held the door for me and we both left the office of the White Room. When we entered the room, Peter was him, speaking to the cabinet members who were already seated around the table. As soon as they noticed me, they all stood up. Good day, everyone. Please have a seat. Peter turned towards me. Everybody except him took their seats. He stood right next to my chair in the middle. And here's our president. He held out my chair for me to sit down and smiled. Please. You want to be behind me so you can stab me in the back, is that it, Peter? I sat down. Let's hear him out. Peter walked to his seat and spoke, still standing. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to discuss our current status and plan the remaining of our term. I know that some of you have had concerns about our style of government so far. There will be a time to speak up about these at the meeting today. But I must also thank you all for your hard work so far. We are very lucky to have a team like this. All of you have been invaluable to this administration. Lilius grimaced at his remarks. Having said that, now we have reached a critical point to our term. We are nearing the end. We have worked long and hard, but we couldn't reform the Swedish constitution. The deep state has acted once more. Our proposal had gathered 166 votes, but was unlawfully rejected. Actually, it was lawfully rejected. We were set up, I suspect, by you, Petter. I could be wrong. The very parliament we control has stabbed us in the back. Who would that be, Petter? We have reasons to believe that this was an organised effort, which Mr. Sol himself was implicated in. The cabinet members started looking at each other. Lucian and I have begun investigating who let us down at the vote when we needed them the most. Gloria and the Conservative wing of the party didn't back us up. Tesoro Kibner and the National Front's MPs didn't like the proposal and voted against it. He paused and looked around the room. But the past is the past, we must now look forward to the future. We are investigating and analysing our faults. We will be taking measures accordingly. He glanced at both Lucian and me. Our party still remains divided. In order to look at the future, we may need to make some changes. On the other hand, the opposition is exploiting our failure to reform. The latest polls show a steep increase in the opposition's support. So let's start the meeting with a brief look at some reports. He fumbled with a stack of papers in front of him. With the latest developments, we've seen an enormous decrease in our popularity. Public opinion about our party is at an all-time low. He took out a piece of paper from the stack and inspected it. A major concern of the people is the state of our economy. We are slowly slipping into depression. Yeah, I'd say I am. This will have dire consequences for our administration. We mustn't lose hope and give it our best. Sordland needs us more than ever. Peter turned to me. I'll give the word to the president now. He sat down. Thank you for the opening. Everyone's eyes were focused on me. First, I want to hear brief reports from each ministry. Let them speak. Peter gestured at Sim and he immediately stood up. Mr. President, dear colleagues, Mr. Vice President was pretty on point with his summary of the current economic status. He also used the word depression. He couldn't have been more correct. Our GDP has shrunk by 15% last year. This downward trend has broken our economy over the last years. We cannot contain this in time. We will end our term, in the truest sense of the word, in a depression. However, this has not yet reflected well with our debt situation. Our total national debt has increased by 85 billion Swedish ren this year. Yeah. If we maintain such a deficit over the next years, we will face a massive debt crisis which could crash the economy. The Assembly is working on introducing new tax bills that will generate more revenue for the government. These efforts will depend on the government deficit situation. On the other hand, unemployment has seen no positive changes. There has been an increase in joblessness. It is now at 26%. Wow, that's high. We have lost control of the situation. We caused millions of people to lose their job. He paused for a moment. Stay silent and listen. Well, one major concern is our nationalisation decision. Our expenses have increased, and it did not send a very positive signal to the global and local market. I believe this will have negative effect on our growth. Also, I have to say that the failure to open our first infrastructure project was costly, but we expect to see it finished in the next months. But apart from all that, I'll finish with an update on our latest project. The manager reports that everything is going well and very fast with the Benfey Airport. I'll keep it brief for the sake of the whole meeting and end my report on that note. Thank you, Mr. Hall. Gus stood up as Simon sat down. I will also keep it very brief, Mr. President. Our farmers are still suffering. Our ministry did its best by giving out subsidies to local farmers, but our agricultural production remains the same. That would be all from me. Thank you, Mr. Manger. Next up was Pascal. Mr. President, our state facilities require immediate attention. We are experiencing long lines in front of hospitals everywhere. We are also currently investigating some reports of small polio outbreak around a village called Himmer. I believe we can get into more details in our policy meeting. Thank you, Mr. Benevol. Joseph stood up. The Ministry of Defence has a very important report regarding our situation with Rumberg. The investigations show that Rumberg was in fact weaponizing rebels against our state. We have learned that they have been aiding the bloody rebels in Velen too. Our military must stand ready for any possible attack coming from Rumberg. We have gathered intelligence regarding their military research and production. They are building a massive army. Our military forces don't have the budget to prepare against such a force. We cannot let them threaten us like this. We don't have a budget to increase here. Make the necessary arrangements, Mr. Lancy. We'll have to use whatever we have to its limit. Of course, sir. David stood up. Mr. President, Perla has agreed to begin deal negotiations. We'll be moving on with that very soon. The region is very unstable. With the incidents at Rumberg, Velen and Helgeland, we must be very cautious. We can talk in more detail at our foreign policy meeting. Thank you, Mr. Visky. Ciara was next. Our ministry is working day and night to improve our education system and increase its accessibility. We have accomplished a lot with our new curriculum. Our reforms will be greatly improving as our output as a society. Lilia stood up. Mr. President, and there is an important report from our intelligence officers. We have disrupted the radio signal of several active Bloody Freedom Front militants in Bergia. There seems to be some sort of preparation going on. Our police is also under pressure from people beginning to protest again. We might need to implement some sort of measures soon. We will provide you with a more detailed report at a later date. One last thing, I would like to transfer the gendarmerie under the Ministry of Interior to improve the internal security efforts. Haven't heard of this before. I'm still working on the proposal and have legal backing for it. I was going to mention it later. The Ministry of Defence shouldn't be meddling with the internal security affairs through the gendarmerie. We had several incidents where they were too violent too quickly, and it stems from military officers giving reckless orders at times. Fair. And the security situation gets more problematic, it might be necessary. It will eventually cause a problem between our forces. There are also miscommunications going on. We will transfer the gendarmerie to the interior in the future. I can't make that promise, Joseph would be furious. That is unfortunate. Lily smiled faintly. Do you have anything to share, Mrs. Mogner? Nia shook her head. Not at this moment, Mr. President. You are already well aware of what's going on. I will update you on our next steps in the judiciary in another meeting. Thank you. Nia took her seat. Next, I want to talk about our new focus and some of my plans forward. The state of our economy is very concerning. It must be our focus to achieve quick economic growth. Simon nodded in agreement. We can't get elected if we do not improve the economy. Almost everybody seems to be in agreement with me. There are no comments. Let's move on with the meeting. I believe that is everything. Everybody packed up and left the White Room. I went back to my office. At last, 2.5 years had gone by so fast. We have a report here. Whistleblower agent report. Agent Hailstone has revealed intelligence about a secret nuclear weapon program developed in Rumberg. Our intelligence has verified the details relayed about a heavy water facility in the north of the kingdom and a ballistic missile test site. Our agent will be provided security under the protection program and will be given resources to transfer further intelligence to our units. We have a report from Estord. Gang violence diminished. The police chief in Estord reported that local police forces have finally eliminated one of the biggest money-making schemes of the Coronelli. According to the report, over the last months, 40 mob members have been arrested, along with 3 high-ranking members of the Coronelli. Well, at least that's something positive. Anti-government protest from Gelsord. Yesterday morning, a group of protesters assembled in front of the Gelsord City Hall and have not yet dispersed. The group was responsible for blocking out vehicles, including city buses and transport trucks, and have been handing out anti-government pamphlets to passers-by. The mayor of Gelsord reported that the situation posed no active danger and that people are only exercising their right to protest. I tend to agree. Suzerain protests. Thousands of bloody people have gathered in protest and called for the resignation of Governor Bron and President Rain. Governor Bron reported that certain groups within the protesting crowd vandalised shops and public property, and regional police force intervened. According to the report of the police, the group dispersed, but hundreds were wounded. The police are also said to have found 11 illegal Rumbergian-made pistols in the crowd. Well, this is the fallout of the failed reforms, of course. What is this? Address to the nation speech. We'll end with the address to the nation. Lucian and I walked into my office in the Maroon Palace to make my address to the nation speech. It was unusually crowded today. Cameras, lights and microphones were set in place and the crew was standing by ready to start filming. Are you ready, sir? Yes, let's do that. Good. I think the crew is ready. As soon as you take your seat, we can go live. I took my seat and rearranged notes on my desk as a crew member powdered my face with a cotton puff. After everybody was ready, the director gave the sign to start filming. I looked directly at the camera. My fellow citizens. Auto election change. Alright. From the moment I sworn in, I have done nothing but fight to achieve the change we demanded. The copies of the plan to dismantle Sordland's ancient government structure, place it one that met the needs of the modern country. Number 1. However, alas, my vision was too grand for the narrow scope of our current assembly. If assembly members had their way, Tarquin Sol's constitution would last until the end of time. And so, yet even they would have passed my reforms if Sol himself hadn't intervened. But I will tell you this, I'm not done fighting for you. Historians shall look upon this as but a minor hurdle. It's time to put the setback behind us and focus on the challenges ahead. The future is in our hands. Together as a country, there is no end to what we can achieve. Took a deep breath, Lucian's shoe to fly away from my forehead. Not looking good on camera there, Lucian. With reform now on the table, off the table, I shall keep following through my promise to Sordland's national security. That by focusing on the economy, that's where we have to focus right now. I thank you, standing by me, your presence, both in good times and bad. I'd like to thank my wife and children for standing by me. I'd like to thank my vice president. No. I'd like to thank my chief strategist. I'm going to thank the people. Amogna Veskor Vectans Sizdar. The director gave the cut signal and the cameraman stopped filming. My speech was finished. Right. And we continue to the next section. Revelation. What, I wonder, is being revealed? We are in turn 8. We have 2 unread newspapers. Queen Beatrice demands reparations for centuries-old alleged war crimes. Queen of the Romberg, Beatrice Livingston, brought up Estord instance of the 15-Day War, uniting forgotten century-old debates of sordid war crimes. Spoke out about the need for peace and change in Eastern Mokopa. The way forward can only be walked if past atrocities are finally settled. Queen Livingston claimed the Swedish army in 1870 had massacred ethnic Rums, with plans of committing genocide. Oh, they are revving up to war. Sordland still hasn't claimed any responsibility for their past war crimes, said the Queen. Demanded reparations be paid. They know that can't happen. They're simply revving up to war. 100 killed in Helgeland. According to reports, the riots in Helgeland has already resulted in the arrest of thousands. The number of deaths is believed to surpass 100. Agnolian government has not released a statement about the bloody conflict. Riots in Helgeland had exploded out of proportion in the aftermath of the murder of a Valgish Helgelander. The majority of the arrests and deaths belong to the Valgish community in the island. The governor of Helgeland claimed that the riots were being incited and supported by the Valglandian government. Entirely possible. Do we have any reports lying around that we want to pick up? No. So next time we will return with departure of President's son from home. Residence of the President of Sordland. So we will be... Oh, there is a report there. We'll be saying farewell to Frank. Meanwhile, Gendarmerie police issue. A massive miscommunication between the Interior and Gendarmerie resulted in a failed raid in Velsord. The Ministry of Defence and Interior have both put the blame on each other. There'll be a gathering soon to solve the ongoing dispute within security. Not good. Alright. And that's where we will end for today. I've been Yorkie the Talespinner. You've been a wonderful audience, and this has been Tales Over Coffee. We follow the tale of Suzerain and the failing presidency of Anton Ray.